Yeah. Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody to this first meeting of our Earth Charter focused inquiry. And I think this is a sort of exploratory meeting, considering what that might mean and what we might do. So we are going to welcome people's thinking about their response to the invitation that Norman sent out and what that might mean for the next few months. So, shall we whiz round and just everybody say who they are and where they are? I mean, and just as a reminder, and if there's someone new, then they get the opportunity to hear that. There is someone hovering, I think, about to join us, but let's wait and see. Norman, do you want to say who you are in case we've forgotten?
Yeah, well, we all know each other, I guess, because we are the old hands, as it were. Yeah, so I'm Norman Jackson. I'm not sure who Zoom user is yet, but it could be Zara. Yeah, and I'm based in Surrey, and those hills you can see behind me are just behind where I live. And I call it Chalk Mountain because I like the name. No one else does, but I do. And it's not as sunny as that at the moment. That's the great thing about a picture. It can be sunny from time to time. But I've been out today. I've been out looking for wild garlic and bluebells and managed to find a whole woodland full of wild garlic.
Great. How lovely. Russ, what about you? I'm kind of going around my screen this way.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in Surrey in England. And the reason I've still got my tie on is that I couldn't be bothered taking it off. Been at a special school that was having an inset day, and I wasn't delivering the inset, which made it much more relaxing than it normally would have been. But it gave me the chance to hear a lot of things said by a lot of the people teaching in the school with different responsibilities. And then I was able to compare my impressions with these people in conversation with another governor and the head teacher. And it was interesting how my impression had been significantly more favourable than what they considered to be the actual truth of their effectiveness in leadership. So an interesting thing. I mean, where do you start? But there we go.
So you're wearing your positive lenses today, so.
Yeah, I just wish that I should have put sunglasses on. I wouldn't have got so dazzled.
Yeah, thank you. How about you, Glyn?
You're muted.
Yes.
Okay. As I said, I'm sitting in a pub in Dyserth, North Wales, and it's very noisy here, but I've come to the quietest part of the pub. I don't usually do dancing on a Tuesday night. My sticks have a problem with that. So, but today has been a glorious day, glorious, absolutely sunshine from start to finish. So
Brilliant.
Excellent. Yeah.
So you've got your positive lenses on too. That's lovely. I could really do with that. So thank you. Valerie.
Hi, everyone. Well, we're hopping across the Irish Sea. I'm coming to you from Tipperary in Ireland. I work primarily in formal education in second level in Ireland, funded by the Department of Education. I work with school leaders, embedding sustainability in the curriculum. And I'm currently in the middle of a doctorate on sustainable futures. Lovely to see everyone again.
I hope we're going to feature heavily in that, Valerie.
You don't know it yet, but you're about to be my critical friends.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So, Josie, you've just arrived. Can I include you now? We're just doing a bit of introductions, although we know each other.
Yes, I don't know. I was here. I've been hearing everyone, but apparently I was like an invisible, I don't know. But I was here. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Josie Josefina. I'm from Chile. We've been working together, I think, since the pandemic, previously, probably. Here's a Rose Day, you can see. Wonderful, but autumn should be a bit colder. Speaking about Earth Day, and I've just come from the Early Years Center, which I lead, and we were celebrating Earth Day.
Fantastic. Lovely. How interesting, autumn, and we're desperate for spring.
I know, but apparently because of the weather and the climate change and everything, apparently all the seasons are the same. It's warm everywhere, anywhere, or it's everyone
Yes,
is drowning everywhere.
yes,
Very
yes.
exaggerated situations.
True, true.
Good to see you all.
Good to see you. Jenny, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I'm Jenny. I think you all know me by now. I'm also in Surrey, about 10 miles from London, so a bit nearer London than our other Surrey friends. If I'm looking tanned, it's because I've literally just got back from Morocco, where I was attending a conference, a psychiatric conference. And so I've come from the sublime to the ridiculous 38 degrees one day last week, down to rain today. So good to be home.
Good. Well, that's nice. And I hope we feel like home too, with familiar faces. And there's no one else joining us at the moment. So I'm Melissa, and I'm also in Surrey. So we spread from Surrey in England to Wales to Ireland to Chile. So we're truly international group. How lovely. And I went today to take my 93-year-old mum to have her COVID booster. We're still dealing with that. So isn't that amazing to think the journey we've been on? And it was all straightforward and very boring and dull because she's done it so many times before. And I remembered the first time how exciting and celebratory it was. Isn't it interesting? Mm-hmm. Anyway, but welcome to everybody, and it's nice to know where we are and to do some sharing of positive things as well as some moaning about the weather, and I started that. So okay, do you want to move into an introduction to what we're doing, Norman?
Yeah, and we could be joined by a couple of other people. I'm expecting Zara from Iran, who was with us on several inquiries a few years ago, and also Maria, who may join us about 7:30. She's working with clients at the moment, so she will try and pop in and just say hello basically before she pops out again, but she wants to be part of this process. So I will try and share my screen and just say a few introductory words. Okay, can you all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Great, okay. Okay. Thank you all for joining us. And you just said it feels like home. It does really. I'm really pleased that we're able to meet again. I mean, I get so much from these inquiries, but without you, we wouldn't have an inquiry. So thank you for your commitment and willingness to participate yet again in one of our inquiries. And this year, we're going to try and look at this thing called the Earth Charter. If you remember, for the last few years, in fact, since I think 2020 was the first time we got together during COVID to look at life-wide learning. But since 2021, we've tried to focus specifically on the Sustainable Development Goals and how we might live our lives in a way that will enable us to create a future that's more sustainable than the one we're currently heading for. And we've had so far 3 inquiries, and I guess we've tried to explore, first of all, what the SDGs are and what they mean to us. And I think through these 3 inquiries, we've had a good go at most of them collectively as a group. and come to understand what they might mean at a personal level in our own lives. And I think what we've learned is that just doing very small things, and Russ reminded me of this the other day, well, first of all, doing something is better than doing nothing, and doing small things can ultimately add up to something much bigger. And it's only by doing the small things, the small stepping stones, that we ever get on to doing more significant things. So I think that's one of the things that we've all discovered. Secondly, I think we've spent quite a lot of time looking at motivations and where and how and why they originate, and also this idea of how ultimately we develop commitment towards something in the way that you have developed towards our own Lifewide Learning project, and the importance of beliefs and values in developing that sense of commitment to something. And then the third thing I think we've done is explore this idea of inner development, that in order to develop commitment towards something, in order then to create actions that enable us to do something, we have to develop certain aspects of ourselves. We use the inner development goals as like a framework to map out the things that we thought we were developing. And again, we seem to have come to a conclusion that most of those goals, inner development goals, are part and parcel of the projects, even if they're at a smaller scale. But we also then noticed that beliefs and values weren't part of those inner development goals. So we've tried to develop them in that sense. I thought it was also worth reminding ourselves that this whole project around Lifewide Learning is based on the idea that we all live each day of our lives in different environments, and over the space of a few days or a few weeks, we inhabit many different environments. And really, this idea is that we integrate all these forms of learning and development into who we are. And so if we are to develop ourselves in ways that will enable us to live a life, a particular sort of life, for a future that's more sustainable than the one we currently are heading to, then these are the spaces, the places, the situations in which we interact with people in the world, which enable us to affect the world in this way. And of course, this collection of environments changes as we move through life. So our lifelong learning and development is the accumulation of who we are and who we're trying to be and who we're trying to become in all these different parts of our life. And just recently, I've become much more aware of trying to express the whole lifelong journey in terms of the number of days that we live. And I think I'm around 26,000 something at the moment. But when you look at life as a series of days in which we are interacting in these different environments, and lifelong learning begins to make much more sense, at least to me. But so again, come back to this idea that we can do small things on a daily basis in different parts of our lives that all have the potential to contribute to a future that's more sustainable than the one we currently have. And something else we explored in our earlier inquiries was this idea that the collection of environments and situations and contexts that we inhabit every day are the ways in which we construct a meaningful life, and that they satisfy, our interactions satisfy or not, different needs that we have, different psychological needs. And so on the left, this idea that we are part of a matrix of needs, and that we satisfy them through our daily interactions becomes very important. So at the very basic level, just existing, having food on the table, looking after families, having somewhere safe to live is important. But beyond that, the idea that we need to relate to people, we need love and affection, we need a sense of belonging and affinities. And then beyond that, then this idea that we have to grow as individuals and as families, and the people that we interact with are all important needs that drive the way we participate in our everyday lives. And in our last inquiry, we came out with the idea that we need to consider, if we are as a race, as a species, to really do affect the future from what we do now, we need to develop this idea that we are in our daily lives now contributing to a future that sustains human existence and all of the life on the planet. And that's, in a sense, something that we need to foster. And then maybe we can pick this up in our current inquiry. So the really big picture then is that we have an urgent need to learn in order to create an existence for the future, if you like. If we look at the 300,000 years of human existence, that works out at about 12,000 generations. For the vast majority of those generations, we've been hunter-gatherers or agriculturalists, living off the land and living very close to nature. But in the last, say, 400 or 500 years, there's been a massive expansion in the way, and a difference in the way we've moved from a worldview that is very much grounded in nature and ecology and how we coexist with all the things around us and relate to those things, to a scientific view of the world, which is much more that we are different and separate from nature and the world around us and all other organisms, and that we're superior, and that through our technologies we've learned to live a very different sort of life. And that is the life that's taking us ultimately to perhaps the destruction of species and the destruction of life on the planet. And going back to the 1950s, we have this beginning of a great acceleration where there's a massive expansion of population globally, and there's a great, if you like, growth in economic prosperity across large parts of the world, but obviously not all parts of the world. But that has been at a great cost, a cost of exploiting both natural and biological and other earth resources. And I like this phrase that Ron Barnett came up with, that the primary purpose of learning is to learn how to live on this tiny planet. Well, we're not doing a very good job at the moment, are we, of living on this tiny planet? And somehow, in the space of 2 or 3 generations, we've upset that balance. And in the space of maybe another 2 or 3 generations, we need somehow to learn how to correct that balance. That's the urgency and seriousness of what we're trying to do. And the bottom little circle merely emphasizes that we've now crossed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, which are considered to be very important to sustaining life on our planet, which is pretty serious. And the Earth Charter sort of fits into all this. I'm going to say a little bit about the history at the moment, but it's currently being positioned in terms of a global framework of ethical principles that will help us navigate this next 2 or 3 generations that have to get us to a new sort of civilization, which they're calling an ecological civilization. I just want to say a few words about the Charter by referring to what it says in the preamble to the Charter, because I can't express this any better than what the Charter does. So he says, we stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly independent and fragile, the future at once holds great peril and great promise. To move forward, we must recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny. We must join together to bring forth a sustainable global society founded on respect for nature, universal human rights, economic justice, and a culture of peace. Towards this end, it's imperative that we, the peoples of the earth, declare our responsibility to one another, to the greater community of life, and to future generations. And I think that embodies really well what the Charter is setting out to do. It's trying to encourage us to accept sort of universal responsibility for the future. So where did this Charter originate? Well, it goes back, like the Sustainable Development Goals, to 1987, when the World Commission on Environment and Development, known as the Brundtland Commission, launched the Common Future Report with a call for a new charter to set new guides and new norms to transition to sustainable development. But it's had quite a long history. Some initial thinking was done prior to the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, but it didn't get very far. And they had hoped that there'd be a declaration at that summit to adopt the Earth Charter, but that didn't happen. And over the next 5 or 6 years, Maurice Strong, who was the Secretary General of the Rio Earth Summit, and Mikhail Gorbachev launched this initiative around the Earth Charter, and it was supported by the Dutch government. So endless drafting, endless consultations, and they make a great deal about the variety and diversity of views and perspectives that were brought to bear on this. And after numerous drafts, the Earth Charter Commission came to a consensus that and adopted the Earth Charter in March 2000 at a meeting held at UNESCO headquarters. And then 2003, UNESCO recognized the EC as an important document that became connected to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, but isn't very explicit. So I think I only came across it about 12 months ago, which, given that I've done lots of reading around here, it clearly indicates that it's not something which is communicated very well across the world. I guess I'll just come now to recently the Earth Charter Education Centre, which is built in the Peace University in Costa Rica, held a conference which I went to in Orlando, and the conference theme was reimagining education for ecological civilizations, and that is, if you like, where the current people who are facilitating communication of the Charter are positioning the Earth Charter now. It's in respect of this idea of ecological civilization. So the Charter itself, we sent a copy in the briefing note prior to the meeting. It has 4 core sustainability values: respect and care for the community of life, and then 4 key ethical principles related to that: respect Earth and life in all its diversity, care for the community of life, build democratic societies, and then secure Earth's bounty and beauty. Second core value is around ecological integrity: protect and restore ecological systems, prevent harm, applying a precautionary approach to whatever we do, adopting sustainable patterns of production, consumption, and reproduction, advancing the study of ecological sustainability. And then the third value around social and economic justice, to eradicate poverty, ensure that economic activities promote human development, affirm gender equality and universal access to resources and human rights, uphold the right of all to natural and social environment, and then democracy and non-violence and peace, strengthen democratic institutions, integrate sustainability into formal education and lifelong learning, treat all living beings in respect and consideration, and promote a culture of tolerance, non-violence, and peace. So we'll have a chance in a few minutes for you to share your initial perspectives on the framing of the Charter and those core values and principles. We envisaged a sort of process, and again, in the discussion that follows this introductory remarks, we can explore this and maybe adapt the process if we think there's a better way of doing it. But our initial feeling was that we might focus in the first month on the Charter itself and look at how it provides a framework of values and ethics for building a more just, sustainable, and peaceful world. And from that, can and should we create our own statements of beliefs and values based on the Earth Charter that reflects our own particular circumstances, needs, and interests. There is a feeling, we had a feeling in our initial engagement with the Charter that it's huge and massive in scope and content, and maybe an interim step where we try and create something which is much more closer to our own lives would be something that would be a useful step in if you like, animating and make this work for us. And then the core of the process, our inquiry process, would be either taking one or more principles from our own statements, or one or more principles directly from the Charter. We identify and start to create our own pathway to a more sustainable future in a similar way to the way we use the Sustainable Development Goals. And as part of that, we'll come together regularly to sort of explore and share our experiences and explore what's come out of them. And then the final stage to record and share our experiences of learning in some way at the end. We put some ideas there, but we can use other techniques as well. So that's the basic process, which we can talk about in a few minutes. And I guess I stop talking now, and we can share our initial feelings about the process and about the Charter. And so comments, questions, concerns, suggestions about the process of inquiry, which Melissa is going to facilitate now.
Okay, so thank you, Norman. That was a whiz through, a lot of context, but really helpful for us to think about when we're embarking on this. So I hope everybody was able to see where the thinking has been so far and what we're proposing over the next few months. When we first looked at the Earth Charter, Jenny, Norman and myself, we had various kind of reactions to what that meant, having done quite a lot of work with the Sustainable Development Goals, and seeing this as perhaps an even bigger, well, certainly, well, bigger's not right, but a different, but again, a big global, obviously, focus with perhaps a lot of different things to focus on, many of which felt, I'm talking here about kind of beyond me. So that's how we came up with this kind of sort of personalization idea. What are your reactions, or what were they when you first saw the Earth Charter? You might have been familiar already. Jenny.
Can I just throw one extra bit in from what you were saying? Originally, we started talking about creating our own manifesto, and we had a lot of discussion backwards and forwards. I personally felt manifesto was too politically charged, and eventually we came to the sort of compromise of a statement of beliefs and values, which I felt much more comfortable about. I mean, I'd welcome other views on whether I was misguided or whether you prefer the SPV notion.
What do other people think about that? So manifesto was one concept, and the statement of beliefs and values, another concept that seemed to avoid some of the issues we felt might be caught up with the idea of a manifesto. By the way, have we lost Glyn? I think we may have.
He's not in the room, waiting room, so he must have dropped out. Maybe it got too noisy in the where he was.
Yeah. I just wanted to check. I didn't want to be ignoring anybody just because I couldn't see them on my screen. Sorry.
I think he's gone to the bar to get another drink.
Yes. Well, I hope he's getting one for us. So I think what we were saying was, what do people feel about the manifesto, beliefs and values side of things that we've just flagged up? Yes.
It's big again, and because what we're saying and what we discovered from our previous experience, whatever is that big, we should just downsize it to whatever is not only meaningful but possible.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
I think we've learned from our previous experience that we were all very excited about the big major frame, and I think we've discovered that we can do little bits of each one of those points, probably.
Yes.
And maybe choosing one or two or three that are at not our, I wouldn't say in our comfortable area. I mean, we should go out of our comfort zone as well, but out of our comfort zone, I think we could be in that space where, because we've been previously a bit disencouraged because of the size that we tried previously and we didn't get there, probably try something too small we could be in the area that we would be saying, okay, this is so big, I'll go for a small thing that I can do. And I think we should be in like balancing both, trying to go out of our comfort zone and also be aware that it should start from wherever we have some influence.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. When you talk about too small, though, I'm also thinking about that grain of sand in your shoe, which is tiny but has quite an enormous effect.
Exactly.
So it could be a small thing with potential. Yes. Yeah. Great. Any thoughts from anybody else? Was anybody really put off by the Earth Charter? Not what it was trying to do, but where am I in this, you know?
I might chime in,
yes.
Melissa. Interesting, Norman, that you mentioned about not being familiar with. I think the Earth Charter to me was something that was there, but probably because of this, I sat and read through it a little bit more thoroughly, and like you, wasn't as familiar as I thought I was. And it's interesting to see how it runs in the timeline parallel with the Sustainable Development Goals, and how they both found that space and what gets traction and what doesn't. And I suppose leaning in then to what Josephina just said about what is too small, it's all kind of relative. You know, what I might consider a small action might be quite a big leap for somebody. And I think if I was to say, I certainly would lean more to the statements of beliefs and values. And apart from my own work in the formal education space, I was really struck by the second statement in that first pillar about care for the community of life with understanding, compassion, and love. And I thought it was interesting language around sustainability that we don't hear a lot. You hear the operational piece, and you hear the kind of form of the policy piece or whatever. So that really, I suppose, struck me in terms of, in a positive way, in terms of language we don't tend to use, but I think it allows us to be very personal, allows something to be very big, but also allows it to be very much within my remit in terms of that compassion piece. And I'll finish then, I suppose, on the thing that I'm thinking about a lot at the moment is what gathers us here, what motivates people to act and to engage, and in a curious way. And why do I care? And I wonder if we can harness the why. Does that set us on a course of helping people to care? So kind of a lot of strands in there, but that kind of, I suppose, would sum up where I'm at and my thoughts on it at the moment. But really excited to look at it in more detail. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Valerie. Norman.
Yes, can I just come in on the back of that was really interesting what you said, Valerie, about the language. And I think it is so different to the SDGs. And clearly UN's creating targets and goals which can be measurable. I mean, that's but this document isn't a measurable document in that sense. What I got from the recent conference in Orlando was that there is a really strong spiritual basis to this document. And just in conversation, it was actually up front, it was explicit, I think, as well as in general conversations. But there's a lot of people, and this is it's clearly a very strong thing in America, this, and less so, I think, in Europe, from my understanding. But a lot of it is grounded in the theologian philosopher Thomas Berry, who was writing in the 80s, wrote some very important works which were laying the foundation for trying to understand how we might live a better life for the community of life, shall we say. And I think this document draws on that underlying philosophy and ideology, which is very much grounded in spirituality and care for the earth and care for mankind. So it's very interesting that you picked that up. I think it's there. It's completely explicit.
Interesting. Josephine, are you responding to that?
Sorry to lots of thoughts and things that I'd like to share regarding my area of education, because I'm of course involved with the university, but I'm involved with small ones, with families.
Yes.
I can see how schools have not responded to an ecological education and how that is backfiring them, basically, or the emotional area or the social area. All schools are now worried about conviviality, how people get along, empathy, and things that were not at all part of their even the plan. I mean, their project, their educational project. It could be mentioned there, but it was always language and maths that would be around everything. And I think education has a lot to say regarding on how we've been too late to target things that should be empathy, compassion, and things like that. And when we take care, all the inclusion thing about children being different and learning in different ways, and families, different types of families, all this forced thing that has come into education has made schools obliged to be aware of and change their plans and react instead of propose. And I think that is a very big issue that with the Earth Charter, it's actually there, isn't it? It's a spirituality. It is about a way of looking at things. It's about a philosophy more than content and more than targets.
Yes, absolutely, Josephina. And it looks like we're joined by Maria now.
Hello, I'm not sure if
Hello.
you can see me. I've got a bit of a blur screen. Hi,
Yes,
everybody.
it looks like you're in fog, but we can see you. We can see you.
Yeah, great to be
We-
here.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you here. We're just talking about, yes, Russ is suggesting you just need to wipe your screen, but
No, I think it's I think this
The
phone is
light.
upgrading, but
yeah,
try.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Maria.
Yes, it's
Oh,
Good
brilliant.
to meet you, Norman. Hi.
Yeah, would you like? We've just had some basic introduction, and we're now just giving our first impressions of the Earth Charter. Would you just like to? I know you can only be with us for a short time. Would you just like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. I can't see everybody on my screen, so I apologize. I'm logging from my phone. My name is Maria Kefalogianni. I've liaised with Norman through email. I don't think we've actually met Norman, as in real time like this before. I'm a psychotherapist by background. I'm a trainer in the Salford University and a supervisor. I'm a mom of 3. I'm a student of life.
Well, you've joined a good group.
Yes, yeah, and I love the Earth Charter. I love the passion behind the projects that Norman is leading, and I wonder how I can maybe contribute to this through my community, through the school. I'm hoping to involve the school, but I don't want to promise too big things of myself because I've got my lap too full with 3 children. So yeah, I can stay here for another 10-15 minutes to get some ideas and
Brilliant.
yeah.
Great.
Okay, well, we've been broadly, sorry, Norman, please do.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, one of the topics was scale. What scale can we contribute? And I think we've had several inquiries, and we all come to believe that just picking something that we can handle at the scale we can handle it, that fits our lives, is one of the most important things we do in preparing ourselves for this inquiry. So, and it may take a little while to find that, but we definitely don't want to overcommit and overstretch ourselves. We find something that will make a difference, and however small, it does make a difference. And we all know we always learn and develop new understanding through that process. And the sharing that goes on within the group builds up this collective understanding of what we're doing, which is always great to experience.
Yes. And there is no competition. There isn't. We're all doing our own thing in our own contexts. And that all, as Norman says, comes together in something really very interesting. Okay.
I would like to ask on this. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Of course.
Because I've got some ideas that I've shared with Norman in maybe how that what possible contribution for what I've got in action already as a further ripple. But because I'm planning to meet with my community, with school, to just create a stronger bond in the community of the parents, the schools that my children attend to, I was thinking to somehow bring that in with the school.
Mhm.
But quite often I think people hear, you know, academia and they get freaked out, or, you know, get writing, and I want to approach it in their side in a way that's not intimidating, or the school feeling, oh, that's another big thing for us to lead on, you know. So I've been trying to sit with that and see how it could potentially involve the wider parent community where I live. And what would that mean in terms of involvement, of the parents?
Josephina, do you want to say something about that, given that you're in a similar context of a
In a
school?
similar context, yes. Probably smaller because this is early years. So I've got 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds where parents are, most of them, really engaged regarding like the dream they have about the children. So they're not still involved in the academics, although they have that in the background. But I haven't been able to engage them in the previous inquiries the way I was expecting to, but haven't lost hope. So I think there may be a group, and I've been inspired also by Granny Power. We had another inquiry with Melissa that she led regarding the power of grandparents and families. So I'm also thinking about that and how to inspire different generations regarding what we're doing to live in the earth that we have.
So that, Maria, that sounds like the kind of thing people have been thinking, others have been thinking about, and others have been working on, and sounds like the germ of a great idea, and see what happens.
Yeah, brilliant.
Shall we, Russ, I didn't ask you if you had something to say about the Earth Charter, but I don't need you to say something, but would you like to?
Is that a question for me?
Sorry, for Russ, who's,
Oh,
sorry, I can see you can't see. There are 6 other people here, and I will try to be clear. Maria, sorry, you're not interrogating.
So many things come to mind with all of this that, you know, one really struggles to decide where to start and what's even remotely likely to be effective in changing attitudes and habits, even within my own family. You know, I'm constantly mentioning stuff and moaning at friends as well for their casual attitude, even to simple stuff like recycling. You know, everything just going in the bin, and away it goes to pollute the world a bit more. And you know, Norman gave a very, very interesting historical account of the progress of the whole things, and who could not agree with the desirability of those things in the original charter and the history of the movement. But then, you know, you turn on the news, and what do you find? You find people preoccupied with their own cynical self-interests and power, rather than people who want to actually make the world a better place for as many people as possible. That self-interest, that cynicism, it makes it very difficult, even for somebody who is essentially a bit optimistic, to stay optimistic about doing things. You know, there's that short-sightedness amongst people, as if, well, there we go. I mean, I sign petitions, I moan at people, I've even attended protests, but I'm getting an increasing sense of my own lack of impact, my impotence in the face of these great things that are going on. You know, it's like trying to hold back the tide or something.
Mm,
I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep working at things, because otherwise I'll think, well, you know, you didn't try hard enough. You know, give myself a bit of a talking to. But it's interesting, on page 1 of Norman's information that he sent out in advance, I found myself struck at the near the bottom of page 1, where it says, we have poverty, inequality and injustice, war and destruction in many parts of the world. Clearly, we need to change the way we live if we're to have a future that involves changing the way we think about ourselves in relation to everything else, including the future we will never experience ourselves. And that I thought was quite a powerful analysis there. And even if it's just so that I don't think, you know, I haven't tried enough, I'm going to keep on trying. But I have to say, I am not optimistic about the way things are going.
I'm sorry to hear that, Russ, but I think an antidote to that is maybe all those people that you're talking to and mentioning, maybe they say, oh, Russ is always going on about that, but maybe that's good. Maybe that's a good thing. Josephina,
but none of them want to have anything to do with me anymore. No,
Oh, they will.
I'm only joking
From an
about
optimistic,
I've got to do
I
it for
feel
my
that we have
conscience.
too much information. Sometimes it's because we have too much information. And probably, I just was watching the series of Hernando de Magallanes and his travels around the world and everything. And probably no one knew what was happening in the other side of the world. So it was easier for them just to worry about their little community. Because we have too much information and probably distorts it because of the media, we are so influenced by pessimistic ideas. That's the reason I don't watch news anymore. My mom says, well, you don't want to know what's going on. No, I just want to know what's going on around the community that I have some influence. And probably I'm not interested in something that's beyond my reach. And I don't know really whether, I'm thinking always about Middle Ages. I think Middle Ages must have been worse than this.
Definitely.
And they didn't have information, and they were happy. And there was slavery, there was there was everything, and they were happy. And well, we think they were smelly, and probably we have less information, too much information now, and they had less. I think if we focus on the information of our community, we may become again more optimistic. That's just a little, I don't know, idea, Ross.
That's helpful, and that's perspective again, isn't it? Thank you. That was great. I wonder, Jenny, do you think you might be ready to share how you approach this as just as an example? This isn't, well, this could well be the perfect way to do things, Jenny, but we're offering this as an example of how Jenny came to grips with the Earth Charter and our initial discussions. So do you need to do some swapping over, Norman?
No, I think I just need to share my screen, don't I?
We can't hear you, Norman.
I've made you the host, Jenny, so you should be able to share your
great.
screen now.
Okay, right.
Thank you.
Right, can everyone see that?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
I mean, we've been talking about scale, and I think I began to get very bogged down. So I've just put together 5 slides to show you the process I went through, in the hope that maybe it will reassure you that it's natural to feel overwhelmed, but also maybe learn from some of my mistakes and cut straight to something much easier. So I'm simply going to show you very briefly the stages that I went through, and it took me weeks and weeks before I actually got to a statement, an SPV. So I began by looking at the original, oops, sorry. Go back. By looking at the original assessment that was attached to the charter. And you look at each principle in turn and each subdivision of it, you declare the level of care, and then the level of current engagement. And I found that that was far too laborious. So I abandoned that. My next step was then to look at a simplified version of it. And I think you've got a copy of this. This was my response, and I found it very helpful actually to go through writing my responses in, because it made me reflect rather than the actual words that I came up with. I think it was the process of reflection that was important. So I went through each of the 4 principles, and within them each of the subdivisions, and made my own comment. I found that the final comment, that creating meaning, though, at this stage was irrelevant to me. So it provided, at the end of this process, and it did take me several days to do that, a very comprehensive overview, but it was not succinct enough to be able to make a start an SPV or anything that I could actually act upon. So my next stage was then I started converting the responses into a narrative. And again, this was very arduous. It was very tedious. And it took me days and days. And I actually gave up after I got to, I do one principle, and that was about as much as I could stomach for the day. I'd then do another one, and I was loathing going back to it the next day. So for a long time, I just abandoned the whole thing. I was thinking about my values in the meantime, and I think in a way I began to get some perspective on things. It seemed less daunting after a period of pause, and I just came back completely refreshed. And I actually put together what is my SPV. I gave myself a maximum of 2 pages. In fact, I managed to get it all into 1 page by forgetting all the subdivisions of each of the 4 principles, and within them each of the questions, just trying to focus on what my life meant to me, what my core values were. And so I came up with, this was my statement in the end. I think it's truer to myself. I wasted an awful lot of time maybe going through written versions that I didn't need to go through. But the important thing was to have reflected. And if you can learn anything from that, I offer it as just one person's experience. So I'll stop sharing my screen and hand back to Melissa.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's really useful. I love the fact that you left it and abandoned it for a while and so on, because I was feeling very guilty about doing the same sort of thing. And I also like the idea that you've decided that reflecting was the important thing, and then you came up with something that you felt was much more you and appropriate. So I think that gives us hope for finding a way. There isn't a prescribed way to do this. It's just a question now of finding how we are going to relate to the Earth Charter, and then take that forward in some form of pathway, as Norman's been saying. Any thoughts, comments, apart from thank you, Jenny? Russ, we need your mic.
Jenny, do you mind if I use your final statement or statements as a template for my own, that I can obviously adapt them to make them more appropriate for me, or as appropriate? I'm sure they'll be just pretty much the same in terms of values and areas of potential influence, so that I can wave them at people and say, you know, I've been doing all of this stuff with Norman and everyone. This is what it's about. What do you think? Do you think you could do any of this? And I think that maybe they'll think, oh, so it's not just me, whatever they choose to call me, with some kind of fad, but something that is potentially really, really important for them more than actually for me.
Sounds good.
Yes, by all means, if it's helpful, please do.
Just need to cite Jenny. Just needs to cite you, that's all, as the source.
Well, not even that.
Yes, that's kind, Jenny. You're just sharing your process and where you've got to, and it's lovely if it's inspired a way forward for you, Russ. Okay, have others of us now got a kind of feel? I went through a similar process. I had a real trouble with thinking that I might need to change the politics in the world as well as everything else when I first read it. So I'm glad to have found what I found was I probably did something similar to as in terms of picking a few things that I felt spoke to me. And what I realized was I was almost writing a CV. It was like how I'd got into those things, which was an interesting process in itself. And since I'm often doing work in relation to my family, and I see Maria has to leave us. Goodbye, Maria. Thank you. Maybe it's a good idea to be doing something relating to who I am rather than who I might pretend to be. So I think finding those beliefs and values, making evidence the beliefs and values I'm acting on is probably a good start. Okay, any comments? I was just conscious of how we're getting very close to our deadline, and we were really leaving the last few minutes for any more general questions. We've had quite a lot of discussion in between things today, so I wonder if there are any more thoughts or ideas or
Just a short one, Melissa. I think it's really interesting, just those last few minutes, and I'm thinking the kinds of things we're talking about to me are very innate, and I feel I know what they are, but I think the process of writing them down and
Absolutely.
structuring them is going to be really interesting, because for me they're very much born out of feeling.
yes,
And that's going to be an interesting process, not just for me, but I think in terms of maybe how we progress this and how we move it forward, and the language, back to that language piece again,
yes,
that, you know, I see in the very last one they're talking about that tolerance piece, that even though we're in an age that is purporting to be supremely tolerant, I feel that there's a kind of an underbelly of silence, that people aren't daring to move themselves into the space to share because it doesn't sit with what other people want. So there's a kind of, I'm afraid to offend, I'm afraid to upset, so I'll say nothing. But I haven't changed hearts and minds. So I think it's a really complex space, but I think it's really, really valuable and really timely. So that's just where I'm at. It's a gut thing. So it'd be interesting to see what that looks like in words.
absolutely. Jenny.
You mentioned narrative, and that was one of the processes I went through. I found I was explaining, for example, I spent my life in teaching and I've done this, that, and the other, and I had to cut through that. It was a phase I had to go through in my reflections, but I didn't feel that that was relevant to my actual SPV in the end. I had to drill into it and get the core message from that. That's only helped.
Interesting. Thank you. Yes, it is. It is. Thank you. So Norman, what next? What are we hoping to do between now and the next meeting? So we're proposing monthly meetings again towards the end of each month.
Yeah, if I just comment on what Jenny just said. I mean, recently
Yes,
I looked at my life, as it were, and where I've really thought about living in a way that is going to help create a better future. And it's really quite a recent thing that I've been aware and conscious of trying to do things. You know, maybe some of it was implicit in life, but not explicit like it is now. So I think that idea of narrative, life narrative, actually is about changing the narrative to some extent in line with new beliefs and values, that as we become more aware of what clearly is a very important thing we're trying to do. So that's very interesting. I think the idea of narrative and how through even doing things like this, we change the narrative. Yeah, so next steps, I think.
Catalina's just
Catalina.
joined us. Hi.
Hello, are you finishing or starting?
I'm afraid we're finishing.
I did the time exchange
Yeah.
from
Time
then.
thing.
Oh, no,
It
I'm sorry.
happens. It happens. I understand because we have these differences of timing, and we move 1 hour, then the others do as well. So
Well, we missed you, Catalina, but you're here now. So Norman's talking about what next, and obviously there'll be a recording of this discussion. So thank you for coming.
Yes, hi Catalina. I'm sorry that you've missed the meeting, and I will try in future to give the time zones from where we all are, you know, the equivalent as a prompt.
I'll be more careful. I'm sorry.
Yeah, as Melissa said, there is a recording, and it's been a really interesting discussion. So I think it's well worth listening to it. Yeah, so for the next stage is to familiarize ourselves with the Earth Charter and to try and almost get to a position where you have an idea about what you want to do. So by looking at the Charter, trying to work out your relationship to it, Jenny's given us a very good example of how we might create our own simpler synthesis of the things that really matter in the Charter that become our own, as it were. And that's, in a sense, the ideal process, is to get something that we can assimilate ourselves and readily action, and it comes to mind when we think about things. And that was what we were hoping for by doing this step of taking the very comprehensive Charter and bringing it close to us, through making it clear to us what our values and beliefs are in respect of the core principles within the Charter. So, and if we come back next month and we can share some of what's happened, our own statements maybe, and also our ideas for how we might create some sort of action around something in those statements that is important to us. I think that's how we imagine it going forward. Does that make sense?
Yes, everybody seems to be nodding or signaling in some way or another, and Catalina's doing her best to work out where she is.
But we can interact through the email group as well, and
Yeah, we can definitely.
and ask questions if we're not clear.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're out of our budgeted time by a few minutes, so should we bring this to a close unless somebody would really like to say something? And I'm sorry, Catalina, it's such a short meeting for you. Sometimes they're good. Okay, well, thank you. It's lovely to see everybody, and what a lovely meeting. There was lots of talk about passion and feelings and values, and you know, and also, you know, our doubt about our impact, and what an interesting meeting with humility, but big ideas. That's rather lovely, I think. So thank you, everybody. That's quite a good start to this whole project.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you everybody for coming.
Bye,
Thank you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
all.
Take
Thank
care.
you
Have a
all.
good evening.
Bye-bye.
Lovely to see you
Bye.
again.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Now, Jenny, I'm going to stop the recording. I think it's been with me, so I don't think you have to do anything.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.